Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Strategoy video. We're riding the wind yet again in today's guide, but this time we're bounding up and down on our kangaroo steeds. I'm of course talking about the Huraken Windchargers. As usual, we'll cover their War Scroll abilities first, and then move on to the roles they can fulfill in the LUMINETH Force. We'll extrapolate on these roles in the basic tactics section. We end the guide with a comparison between Windchargers and dawnriders, as they can fulfill similar roles but do different things better than the other. Let's start off with their stats. Windchargers boast an impressive 14-inch move, paired with 2 wounds, a bravery of 7 and a save of 5+. That makes them just as fragile as sentinels, albeit a lot faster. As for their damage, they break the Lumineth mold since they don't inflict mortal wounds. Instead, they have 2 shots with a -1 rend. Note that their range is a meager 12 inches, which means they'll have to go in before they do damage. Casting the wind spell Guiding Flurries on them to extend the range by 6 inches gives them a bit more leeway though. When they fight in melee, they lose 1 attack but gain a point of rend. These stats used to be quite impressive, but with big saves and a lot of rend floating around the game right now, you won't be using these as a hammer unit anytime soon. Their abilities cement this fact. Rather than for damage, you'll be using these guys for their speed and maneuverability. Their Huraken rule is called Move Like the Wind, and it allows them to make a pile-in move to wherever they want, instead of towards the closest unit. In addition, when they make a charge move in the same turn, you can pile in 6 inches rather than 3, and you can fly. This allows you to reach squishy heroes hiding behind screens or to get out of combats you dislike. Their Windcharger arrows also ignore cover bonuses. Right now, that hardly ever shows in competitive games anyway, but it might help you out against certain armies or units that simply allows them to benefit from cover. Think of Ideneth during their first turn, where the entire army is considered to be in cover, even if they aren't. Go Where the Wind Blows lets the Windchargers hop over terrain as if they could fly, which is very useful if you're able to play around a line of sight blocking terrain piece. Keep in mind that this rule does not count for units, neither yours nor your opponent's. If you want to hop over models, you'll have to do that during your pile-in step, or when a wind mage is nearby. More on that later. Windchargers can be battle line in a Hellon army, but you'll be using them most often as screens or for hero hunting. Let's start off with their battle line role. When you add Windchargers to a Hellon force, they're considered battle line. This can be quite useful, as you'd be able to drop some of your slower units. It allows your army to be extremely fast when you build it completely out of Windchargers, Foxes and dawnriders for example. Having them as battle line can also come in handy in missions like Power in Numbers, where battle line always claim objectives over other troops. On the other hand, you open yourself up to an easy broken ranks for your opponent, as Windchargers are very fragile. With a 5+ save, they won't survive most fights, and they no longer have hit and run as it did in a battalion in 2nd edition. So anything that charges into them and fights before they do will rather easily take them out. Even with that being the case though, they're still pretty good screens. Thanks to their incredible maneuverability, they are very good at getting where they're needed. They can always move over terrain, and if they start wholly within 6 inches of a wind mage, they can move 16 inches rather than 14, and they can fly. With a pile-in move of 3 or even 6 inches if you've charged, you can get these guys wherever you want. That is also the reason why they are good at hunting heroes. Avoid sending Windchargers into enemy units if you want them to survive. They'll fare better against small heroes there, since they can first weaken them with their bows and then charge in for the kill. Thanks to their big pile-in moves, they can even hop over screens, which we will discuss in the next segment. As always, we first decide from which nations the Windchargers benefit most. Then we move on to in-game tactics for movement and combat. As far as nations go, there's one standout. Eumetrica is sadly not beneficial to the Windchargers at all, though Eumetrica itself would benefit from having some faster units in its forces. Sire's alright, as you'll be able to double up on Aether Cords and keep your screens alive for a longer time. Iliata is not very useful, as a low bravery doesn't really bother the Windchargers a whole lot. As they're not wizards, Zytrek also doesn't add anything to our kangaroos. And neither does Alumnia. And so we end up with Helon, as their unsurprising best nation. Helon makes them battle line, adds an extra shot in combat, but most importantly, gives you a command ability to move them out of combat at the end of the combat phase they fought in. This is the bread and butter of a lot of their movement shenanigans, which we will discuss right now. There's a lot to consider when moving these guys, as this is where they'll prove to be most valuable. Most of their usefulness cannot be distilled into an info chart, as this changes from game to game. There's two things you'll always have to keep in mind though. First off is their synergy with a Wind Mage. When they start their move holding within 6 inches of a Wind Mage, they can move 16 inches instead of 14 and they fly. This is very useful to jump over screens or fighting units. Imagine the likely scenario where your Warden ranks have clashed with the enemy. Usually, their backline is either weakened or empty. With flying Windchargers, it's easy to move over troops and go for objectives or battle tactics, like aggressive expansion or savage spearhead. Your Windmage can hang around safely behind your lines, while your Windchargers rush out to claim the enemy's field. Bonus points if you cast Speed of Fish on them for an impressive 32 flying move. In the same vein, you can also get them where they need to be by slingshotting them across the battlefield. Pick out a weak unit, preferably, move up to 14 inches, charge them and pile in 6. Use that pile in move to dash over your enemy. Fight and then use Helon's command ability to make a move at the end of the combat phase. You can cover some serious ground this way and slingshot yourself forwards. It's definitely a surprise move to capture your opponent's objective this way. This kind of playstyle rests the essence of the Windchargers. They're not a blunt weapon or even a sharp one. They're a tactile dart that's not there to inflict major damage, but to strike where your opponent doesn't see it coming, or where he can't prevent it. Pulling off this playstyle is incredibly gratifying, but it takes a lot of practice to do it right. In combat, they play much the same way. You could either use them as a guerrilla unit that hides behind terrain, charges to fight and then darts out again, or you could go hero hunting. If you're planning on the former, find a good piece of sturdy line of sight blocking terrain to hide behind. Move over it in your movement phase and engage the enemy. This works well in tandem with the Wind Spirit. If you engage the same units, the opponent can only pile in 1, and you can pile out 3 inches backwards, so to be in range with your bows, but keeping outside of the threat range of your opponent. With the Helon command, it should be easy to dart away or even hide behind the same terrain piece again. Consider leaving them in combat though, if you want to finish off that unit and you expect to get priority next turn. With Helon especially, their shots in melee will dish out some serious hurt. The same is true against heroes, and it's usually more effective than fighting an entire enemy unit. Weaken the hero first with missile shots. If you're running a 5-man unit of Windchargers, you might inflict a wound or 2. With all-out attack against an average save, you'll do 3 wounds, which is enough to finish off the hero in melee. It doesn't even matter whether a hero is hiding behind an enemy screen, as you can simply pile in straight over their heads. Throughout this strategy guide, you might have wondered when you take Windchargers instead of dawnriders. That's why we included this extra segment in which we compare both units. If you look at plain stats and abilities, There's something to say for both units. Windchargers can deal damage from range, albeit only at 12 inches. Dawnriders, on the other hand, inflict mortal wounds, which is invaluable in the current meta. They also fight better against hordes, which are not very prevalent right now. Their basic stats are very alike though. They both excel in the movement department, but Dawnriders fare better when we look at saves, which is very important. Yet, when you look at the shenanigans they can pull off, the Windchargers might triumph. So, what conclusions can we draw from this comparison? Both units are very fast, but they have different kinds of movement. Windchargers function well without backup and are a bit of a lone agent unit, while Dawnriders are spellcasters and can support other units in your army that way. Both are mainly used as screens right now, which Dawnriders are better at with a better save and spellcasting perks. Then again, Windchargers can get to places where Dawnriders simply can't, and can really put your opponent in an awkward position when it comes to objective play. So when in doubt, we advise taking Dawnriders, as they are cheaper points wise and easier to use. Thanks to them being wizards, they're also more flexible, and they benefit from almost all nations. Windchargers are a very niche unit with a specific purpose. If you want to challenge yourself, or you're very good at positioning already, take the kangooroos. When used well, they can be very rewarding, and you will catch your opponent off guard with them. Just remember to play them differently from any other cavalry. They're a scalpel, not a blunt weapon. And with that, we've reached the end of this guide. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and all we had to share on the Windchargers. They're one of the most challenging units to play in a Lumineth roster, but they're a great substitute for Dawnriders. If you enjoyed this content, or are interested in more, please do leave a like and consider subscribing. I try to put out quality content with every single video, and it means the world to me to see that you guys have enjoyed it so far. I eagerly read and try to respond to all comments, and I'm always curious to hear your feedback. Also, let me know on what units or armies you'd like another guide. We take everything into consideration when deciding on new content. So see you in the comment section or in the next video. Cheers!